Hey everybody, it's Ryan again from Ryan's Guitar Shop. So I'm continuing my series on how I teach blank to middle schoolers, and today's subject is chords. So I'm going to show you how I introduce chord diagrams to them, and show them how to read a chord diagram, and then show them how I introduce the first three chords that I always show to my beginners, and then show you how I check for their knowledge with a classroom of 30 plus kids in it. Now, I will also use this procedure whenever I teach a new chord or new sets of chords. Obviously, I skip the how to read chord diagrams part, but anytime I come back and teach them a couple of new chords, I will go back to, again, some of these steps that you'll see for checking their knowledge with the chords and practice with the chords with them and make sure that they are ready to play. So the very first thing I do is I have a slideshow that goes through and explains how to actually read a chord diagram and what it is. So I have a link to the video here. I've taken the slideshow and turned it into a video so you can use the video. I also have the slideshow available for purchase that I'll put in the description below if you want to use the slideshow instead of the video. So I start with that, explain to them what a chord diagram is, explain a little bit about, chords are different than notes that they've been playing, that we're going to be playing multiple chords and that or multiple strings, and how that's called strumming. And we go through a little bit of that, then I'll again show them the slideshow. Now I show them these three chords, the simple G, the simple C, and the simple G7. I've removed some of those fingers to help them out a little bit. Some people, even on the C chord, will just do the first finger. I think most kids can handle the first and second finger pretty well, so I haven't taken the C chord that far into it. So from this point on, then I'm standing in front of the room. We've gone through the slideshow. We've talked about how to read the chords, and then basically what I'll do is I'll have a overhead on the board with all three chords like this. And then I'll stand up and be walking around the room, and I'll just say, okay, everybody needs to show me the G chord. And then I will scan across the entire room. I'm looking for the correct strings, the correct fingers. In this case, if it's the simple G chord, I'm looking for the left hand third finger on the third fret. And we're not worried about playing it at this point. I think that's really important, is that we're not worried about strumming it. If the left hand can't do it, then the right hand strumming is, pretty much useless in my opinion at this point. So I'm in front of the room or I'm walking around the room. And again, if you saw my walking the board video, I'm making sure it's 100% correct. And now this does eat up some time, but it's real important, again, when I'm teaching 30 plus kids, that they are all in sync or they're all doing the exact same thing correctly before I move on to the next step. So I'm scanning around and say, okay, Bobby, you've got the first finger in the third fret, or Sally, you're on the wrong string, whatever it needs to be to help them out to get that first simple G chord down. And then while they're holding that in the left hand, we have all three of these posted on the board, or it's also in their book on their music stand. I'll say, okay, now let's go ahead and switch to whatever, let's say G7. Usually that's the easier one, because all I have to do is go from the third to the first finger, and I'm just kind of slowly watching them make that shift. Some of them are kind of rotating their guitars and making sure the first finger is there. And once again, I need to slowly go around the room, and best I can in my situation with a crowded room of kids is, just walking around and literally making sure 100% of the kids have it, just giving them, okay, you've got the wrong string, whatever it needs to be to help make sure that they are correct. Now, one thing I'm really strong about too is I don't go around, if it's incorrect, I don't go around and move the finger for them. Or I don't go and say, hey, you need to put, touch their finger and say, hey, put this finger on that fret or so forth. What I usually try and do is, again, I let them know I'm not being mean. I'm just like, that's wrong, you need to fix it. And I'll kind of point to the overhead, and I might give them a little bit, and I might say, that's the wrong fret or that's the wrong finger. But it's real important that they look at that diagram, they look at their hand, and they observe what they're doing wrong and hopefully fix it on their own. Because one of the things I try and tell them is I joke around, is hey, I'm not coming to your house tonight and making sure this is correct. You need to kind of be able to look at the diagram in the book or wherever it is and match with your hand, and you need to be able to see if you're correct. I think that's really important. I know too many teachers that will just go around and fix fingers, and then the kid doesn't really, they know they got it wrong, but all they know is you put your finger there, the teacher put the fingers down for them, and that can make it very confusing to okay, well, did they really learn it, or did they just play because you're fixing it? And then again, I'll just rotate through the C chord. And I will just do this for a good solid 10 or 15 minutes because I tell them part of the learning the chord, the first step is memorizing it with the left hand. And this is the first step, or the best way to learn how to memorize it with the left hand is just go through it 1,000 times with the diagrams available for them, double checking those diagrams every time. There's nothing wrong with that. Because I said later on we won't have the diagrams when we're playing the music. So this first step is all about learning the form with the left hand and just practice switching. So after I've kind of done individually chords and I feel they're pretty comfortable with those chords, again, making sure that everything's correct, go to the C chord, make sure it's 1 and 2, not 1 and 3, or make sure the C chord, especially because there's, it's on different strings and they got to skip some strings for the opens. I've gone through and made sure that I feel pretty comfortable once I see that they can switch and get it almost the entire class on the first try or very quickly, like, okay, do you need to fix that? And they, oh, okay, fix that. When I feel they're pretty comfortable, and it might take, again, a good 10 minutes this first day to do that, or maybe more, but I won't go on to the next step till I feel it's pretty comfortable, or the kids I feel are latching on really quickly and be able to change quickly and accurately. So I'm just calling out the chords. There's no time frame. There's just take as long as you need, but let's make sure it's correct. Then once I do feel like, okay, I call out a G chord, boom, they're on a G chord, I call G7, they do memorize them pretty quickly. The next step that I do, and this might be the next day as well, it may not even be the same day. The next day we talk about, or the next step is that we give them a time frame. Just like they're playing a song, I say, okay, now let's give us a time frame, kind of like when we learned how to play rhythm. You've got a whole note, you got to get from here to here within that whole note, so forth. So I give them a time frame. And so the first thing I'll do is I might put on the overhead and I might just draw this out, or I might just tell them, hey, this is what we're going to play, or the order of the chords, and I might just have them go between two different chords, just maybe G and G7 to start with. And I will say as a class, okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and count to 8 in between each one, or I'll count for them. I'm not really worried about them counting, but I'll say, okay, let's go ahead and start on a G. We're going to switch to G7. We're just going to go back and forth between these two chords, but you have 8 seconds to get between each one. And then I'll pick another one, G and C, and so forth. Then I might throw in all three. Okay, let's go and try and change all three. And then I will shorten that. Once that feels pretty good, the third step would be then to bring it down to the 4 counts. Okay, now we've got a bunch of 3 chords. We're only going to do it for 4 counts. And again, I'm just counting, and the kids are going G, 2, 3, 4, G7, 2, 3, 4. And I might write again on the overhead, I might write out 9, 10 different chord changes with just those 3 chords. And it's on the overhead so they can see it. I shout it out. Okay, we're on G. 1, 2, 3, 4, G7, 2, 3, 4, and C. And again, I'm doing it maybe a little fast. Maybe I need to do a little slower, and I can adjust the speed from there. But we are doing no strumming at all at this point. And at first, the kids think this is kind of weird, again, because we're practicing music without making music. But I found that left hand has got to be solid. And once they get solid with that, the right hand with strumming is going to be so much easier for them at that point. So after 2 or 3 days, well, I shouldn't say 2 or 3 days, probably the second day. Again, if I feel fairly comfortable and I'm watching and observing them and they're changing those chords within the 8 or the 4 counts that I'm giving them, then we will go ahead and add in the strumming. This is important. When they add in the strumming, you've got to enforce them to keep strumming no matter what. And so throughout this activity, I'll just say it's your option. You can add it, remove the right hand as needed. And sometimes I'll see a kid really struggling. I say, maybe Bobby, let's just do the left hand for the next couple of run throughs and see how that goes. Or I'll tell the kids, if you've done just the left hand now, go ahead and try the strumming again and see if it works. And that's a nice, again, way to differentiate the instruction. If kids need to, again, modify a little bit to make it successful, I said your left hand is still the most important thing from there. So I'm going to put in some video clips. Again, I'm not in my classroom. I don't have 30 plus kids, so I'm just going to do the best I can to show you what it would look like. And again, just imagine we've got 30 kids, but this is kind of how I would run the rehearsal, or there's different activities with students after I've, again, explained what the chords are. Okay, so let's go ahead and pretend that this is the front of my room. I've got my students now in front of me. We've gone through the video or the slideshow showing them how to read the chords. Now I'm going to check for their understanding with the chords. They're going to show me the chords. So I'll just announce out, okay, I'd like everybody to show me the G chord with their left hands only at this point. I'm scanning the room. I'm checking for 100% correct chords. I'm making sure the right finger, the right string, the right fret, everything's got to be 100%. Every kid's got to be 100% before we move on. One thing I'll tell them is make sure they're not really pressing down, because it could be a while between. They're just touching the string. And again, we're not strumming, so that won't really matter. I just want to make sure they can find that right chord. After I've gone through, and if I've made a few corrections with some kids, I might say, okay, Bobby, you need to put yours in the 3rd fret. That's the 1st fret. Or Sally, that's the wrong finger. You need to use the 3rd finger for the G chord, not the 1st finger. Again, I'll give them a few little hints like that, but I try to make sure that they're fixing their mistakes, or I might just literally just say, that's the wrong chord. Let's look at the diagram and see if we can fix that. I want to check, see if they can read the diagram, translate that, and fix that on their own. It's really important for me too that they can do that as well. So we'll go through all 3 chords a bunch of times, just me shouting out each one. Walking around the room, checking 100%, and usually after the 3rd or 4th time with each chord, now they start to get it. It goes a little bit faster, a little bit quicker each time. But again, we're not strumming. All I'm doing is checking for left hand knowledge and getting them used to swapping the chords from there. And so that would look a little bit like this. Okay, everybody show me the G chord. And now show me the G7. And now show me the C chord. Okay, after we've done that, and I feel they're pretty comfortable, this is still probably the first day of introducing that chord or these chords, I will go ahead and say, let's go ahead and do a time frame. And what I mean by that is I'll go ahead and say, we're just going to do G and G7 back and forth, back, over and over again. But I'll say you're going to have 8 seconds between each one. So I'll say, okay, go ahead and start on G. Make sure everybody's on G. And then I said, remember, we're going to do G. I will count to 8. The kids don't really need to do that. If they want, they can. But I will count for them. And I said, just need to focus on going from G to G7. So it'll look like this. Okay, so obviously I can't be the student and the teacher in this demonstration, so I'm going to do both. But imagine that the kids are playing and that me, voice, is walking around the room. But this is how we do our first changing exercises. So I've already called out each one individually. Now we're doing it with the time frame. And again, just pretend that, I'm the student and then I'm the teacher. I'm just doing both at once. Just kind of have to use your imagination that I would normally be walking around the room and the student is playing, but I'm going to have to do both for demonstration. So I just say, okay, we're going to do G to G7. And we're going to do it 8 times. All right, and then I just look. Everybody's got the G. All right, here we go. Ready? Begin. G, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, G7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on and so forth. We're probably just going to go back and forth between those two. And then I might say, okay, let's try G and the C. Same thing. Everybody start with G. I check that everybody's got it. Again, we're not strumming, we're just counting. All right, so I'll go G, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, C, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and G, 2, 3, and so on. Just going back and forth. Then we'll add in all 3, same procedure, and then bring it down to 4 at that point so they can do it. Each one with 4 times. Okay, so I might say, let's do G, G7 to C, back to G. Let's do that 4 times. Once again, I'll make sure everybody's ready, and we'll do G, 2, 3, 4, G7, 2, 3, 4, and C, 2, 3, 4, and G, 2, 3, 4. And again, we'll do that a bunch of times until I still feel that most everybody's got that correct. Okay, so probably day 2 after they come back, the second day I will recheck their knowledge real quick. Just again, show me these chords. Let's do a little bit with just the left hand. Then I'll probably introduce the strumming. We'll talk about how to strum the chords correctly. Generally from these simple versions are 4 strings. So from the 4th string through to the 1st, we'll talk about how to do that with the pick. And I'll have them hold like the G chord, and we'll just get a few practice runs of just a single G chord and get them used to that. And then we'll just do the same activities, but we've just added in the strum. So I might just have them do that G chord, just to get the feel of how that's going to strum. Kids are going to be doing all sorts of some weird things. They're going to be doing things like this. So we're just, first off, I want to just kind of make sure they have the idea of how strumming should go, and just feel fairly comfortable they can make a G chord pretty good without, again, switching yet. Again, it's kind of this concept of teaching each hand separately and then putting them together from there. Okay, so once I feel they're fairly decent with the strumming, I'll say the only thing that's changed now from yesterday is we're doing, I was counting out the 8 counts. Now we're going to replace that with strumming. I'm probably still going to count, make sure they're still together, but the idea is adding in the strumming now. So again, right hand has to keep going. And me, I'm at this point usually sitting down with my guitar. I have an acoustic electric that I have plugged into a PA system so they can all hear me. So we're sitting down and I'm playing along, and I'm still observing the best I can. But I found that now me playing along with them, that strumming, having that sound goes a long way to help keep them strumming. So it might look like this on the first outing. All right, we're gonna strum now. Put your pick on top of the 4th string, so that's ready. I'm checking for G chords, and I might, again, just do 2 chords, G to G7. Let's try it 8 times. 3, 4, and go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now keep strumming, don't stop, keep going. G7, 1, don't stop. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now the G chord, don't stop, keep going, keep going, keep going. Strum, strum, strum. Okay, there we go. All right, going through that. Now, funny enough, we've probably got some kids that have dropped the picks in the guitar, they've dropped on the floor. So we're gonna have that hassle to deal with, and I'm probably having to stop already and pick 3 or 4, I've got to shake the picks out of the guitar and things like that. So that's really gonna slow down. It's inevitable. I try and encourage them to strum on the side of the sound hole just a little bit more instead of right over. That does help, so at least it falls on the floor and from there. But at this point now, the next step would be just going straight into songs and showing them how. So I hope this has helped you with this information and some of the procedures I do, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Bye-bye.